Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 4 of season 4 of Babylon 5, Falling Toward Apotheosis. Apotheosis, the highest point in the development of something, a culmination or climax. The Ventari system has been hit by the Vorlons, and Ivanova is broadcasting details of their planet killer and outpost that will take refugees. In the busy arrival lounge, a woman falls while searching for her husband, and she's in danger of being trampled until the crowd parts as Sheridan and Lorien arrive. He helps her up and takes her to Zack, who neither confirms nor denies that Sheridan has come back from the dead. Lorien suggests they need something to believe in, but Sheridan says it isn't him. Lorien says he can't save them all, but Sheridan will try. Garibaldi is poring over secure cam footage of Sheridan and Lorien in particular, remaining deeply suspicious of Lorien's motivation and closeness to Sheridan. Zack is trying to tell him that he's one last medical away from going back on duty, but Garibaldi is riled by the fact that everyone keeps questioning his lack of memory, whilst completely swallowing Sheridan vouching for Lorien, despite both men having gone through a lot in their absences. Garibaldi has also noted that Sheridan hasn't said 2 words to him since they got back, so he remains less than convinced that all is as it should be. On Centauri Prime, Cartagia has plans. Mr. Morden asks that the Centauri blockade Centauri Prime against the Vorlons, on the assumptions that they won't have the strength of will to destroy such a major planet as compared with the smaller worlds and border outposts they have so far attacked. Londo hadn't heard of the Vorlon attacks before this point, as Cartagia has had the news blocked, and Londo is gladdened when Cartagia says he won't be ordering their ships to defend the Shadows. And yet, as he introduces his shadow cabinet of severed heads to Londo, it transpires that he isn't going to get the Shadows to leave either. Instead, he intends to let the Vorlons come and destroy Centauri Prime to form a pyre to elevate him to his promised godhood. He tells Londo not to send the ships, to let it end in fire. Garibaldi's health check seems fine, and Franklin even checking for signs that he was being prepped for insertion into a shadow ship, which aren't there. He tells Franklin that he thinks he might have been pulled into hyperspace as the Shadows left, resulting in his fighter being so far from home when it was found. But again, a flashback as Franklin removes a glove reminds us that he remembers being incarcerated. As he leaves, Sheridan enters asking Franklin for test results, and Ivanova reports on more Vorlon attacks and jamming, with more refugee ports going dark. Delenn and Sheridan finally have a chance to catch a moment together, and she explains her fear that after not being totally honest about Anna, John would not wish to see her. He tells her that he fell on Zahadum, but the thought of her face lifted him up, and he could not love someone that much and not forgive. In the war room, Garibaldi, Ivanova and Franklin note that the station is at maximum capacity, but Garibaldi believes it's only going to get worse in short order, because Babylon 5 is a hub where other races no more of their kind are likely to be. Soon they'll be inundated, and Franklin comes up with the idea of using Epsilon 3 as a safe haven because it's free of shadow influence. Sheridan arrives and agrees. Presumably either Draal will help with atmospherics or some races can manage down there without breathers. The main agenda item on Sheridan's mind is Kosh's replacement. He's resolved to remove him in order to give them a chance of moving without the Vorlons knowing their plans, which is why Garibaldi has been kept out of the loop, as they don't know how well Vorlons can read others telepathically. They seem more adept at broadcasting, but they can't be sure. So Sheridan makes an unusual order, telling Garibaldi to go in with only a small team and effectively tell Ulkesh to pack his bags. He is inevitably less than thrilled by this as a concept, for obvious reasons, but says that if he's ordered to fall on his sword, then he's happy to do it. Sort of. In one of the notes after he leaves that he's cranky even for him, but Zack stands up for him. As he in turn leaves, Lorien and Lita enter and say she'll try and do what's being asked of her. Lorien cautions them that whilst the Shadows were able to kill Kosh, they were first ones. It's going to be a lot harder for Sheridan's crew, because an enraged Vorlon is something they have no conception of, which is when realization dawns on Franklin as to what it is Sheridan has in mind. They need to take the Vorlon out of the picture, by any means. Garibaldi's Suicide Squad rolls into Ulkesh's quarters and delivers Sheridan's ultimatum. After they pull their PPGs, One gets knocked to the ground, and the encounter suit raises a shield to absorb incoming fire before starting to fire shocks back at the security team, followed by emitting a resonance pulse that shatters their breathers, so they have no choice but to pull out if they want to continue breathing. So the whole encounter is, as you might expect, utterly one-sided, but leaves the Vorlon in no doubt as to which way the station's authorities are leaning towards him. Which is what Sheridan wanted, of course. As Sheridan prepares the next move, to his surprise, he gets an incoming call from Londo, of all people. He figures he's reversing the charges. It turns out Londo needs a favour, an estimate of how long it will be before the Vorlons reach Centauri Prime, assuming the reports are true, which of course they are. Sheridan gives him a best guess of a week, and confirms in loose terms that they have something planned. Londo wishes him good luck and says he owes him a favour. Lita returns to Ulkesh's quarters to explain that she believes she now knows who has a piece of Kosh, but they won't let her take him, which Ulkesh finds intolerable, and so he is happy to follow her so that he can draw him out and take him home, which Lita says she would be happy to see. However, it isn't long before Ulkesh realises that Lita is troubled beyond concern for Kosh, and while she tries to block him, she can only do so for so long, but it's too late. He's where he's supposed to be, surrounded by a ring fed by high-voltage feeds that Sheridan now orders activated while telling Lita to get clear. The encounter suit is hit as the camera zooms in on realisation dawning on Ulkesh that he's in a kill zone, as security officers flood the area and open up on him with PPGs at close range. Between their assault and the electrical discharge, his suit finally cracks, and blue-tinted energy form escapes, not registering as a being like Kosh did, more something akin to a squid. Delenn, Lita and Sheridan watch the engagement. In the midst of this, Ulkesh's ship starts to wreck Bay 13, and Ivanova orders it evacuated and the ship released. Sheridan realises that Ulkesh has seen Delenn pulling a guard to safety, and puts himself between him and Delenn, getting gripped by Ulkesh in the process. Lorien then appears behind Delenn and says one word, now. John turns to face Ulkesh and releases Kosh. Delenn realises what's happened, and Lorien confirms that what is now fighting Ulkesh is what is left of Kosh, combined with some of Sheridan and some of him. The Vorlons twist into a vortex that penetrates the ceiling and then flows down the outer skin of the station itself onto the escaping Vorlon ship, destroying it. Lorien moves to revive Sheridan by sharing his own life energy, confirming that this is what he did for John and Zahadum to bring him back. For how long? Delenn asks. Long enough, says Lorien. Definitely some Vorlon leanings with this one. Sheridan slowly comes to, and Lorien himself seems drained by the effort. On Centauri Prime, Londo has rather unusually summoned the Emperor to him. Londo now seems to play into his desire for godhood, pointing out that if, as of course it should be, Centauri Prime is destroyed, who will then bear witness to the god Kartagia, worship at his temples? This does give Kartagia pause for thought, and Londo proposes a solution. Why not travel to Narn to try and execute Jakar, so that the Narn can see his greatness in passing judgment and spread the word of his godhood out throughout the stars? Londo dismisses any security concerns as being beneath the attention of a god. 3 days there, a day for them to see his greatness, then back to Centauri Prime in time to watch it burn. Super! And Londo will go with to personally execute a citizen Jakar. At the station, Sheridan's fleet is coming together. Garibaldi is beginning to rival Ivanova for his ability to induce depression, as he notes that even if they pull off the victory, most of the galaxy has marked their cards and they can't go home. He's clearly much less fun to be around these days. Speaking of lack of fun, Sheridan is aware that Delenn spoke with Lorien about his medical position. Lorien explains that he cannot create life. Sheridan was gravely injured when he tended to him on Zahadum, and Franklin's examination of Sheridan confirms that there are energies at play in his system repairing cellular damage. But Lorien explains they will not do so forever. One day, barring illness or injury, he will simply stop. In human terms, that day will come in 20 years. Delenn is understandably shocked because she believes humans can reach at least 100, but that would only put Sheridan at 60-something. But Sheridan is seemingly accepting of this as a reasonable span. Delenn is less happy, but having asked Lorien to leave, Sheridan explains to her that he knew there would be a price for going to Zahadum, and 20 years is better than none. Then he starts patting himself down and finally uncovers a box from under a chair cushion. Not what he was hoping for, but inside is a ring as a stand-in for the one he will get her, before he gets her another. He explains that this is a human custom when they get married. He wants to spend as much of the time he has left with her as he can, and they kiss. On Centauri Prime, Cartagia is overseeing Jakar's transport back to Narn, but has decided he doesn't like the way Jakar looks at him, and is wondering what to do about him. Londo says he's sure he will make the right decision and leaves to pack, whilst Cartagia orders Jakar's guards out of Londo's earshot to remove his left eye, and the cell door closes. I wasn't trying to be patronising with the explanation of apotheosis. I couldn't quite remember the exact meaning, so I thought it would be best to be safe rather than sorry. This, I think, is a metaphor for Sheridan's fall, leading to his ultimate victory over another first one, which will lead to other high points, clearly one being his human-style engagement to Delenn. Not a progression I quite remembered from this episode, although I did remember very clearly her putting herself in harm's way and John's subsequent Kosh-powered rescue. So let's start there. Basically, Ulkesh was never going to go quietly, and Sheridan had clearly decided that they couldn't afford to have him on the station, given how hostile the Vorlons have turned. Right now, it's them doing all the damage. The Shadows seem entirely defensive at this point. If one of us broadcasts make it clear that the Vorlons are making steady progress in removing potential Shadow hiding places, so the refugee position is critical. Yet as Lorien notes, it's one thing for the Shadows to go toe-to-toe with a Vorlon in countersuit, and something else again for the younger races to try it. But Sheridan is smart. Ulkesh is already arrogant, so sending Garibaldi in knowing he's going to be ineffective is only going to reinforce that arrogance, which allows Leeds to get him into a position where every one of her can aim the station's power output at his suit. Crack the shell, then deal with what's inside. Which is perhaps where they struggled, although the effects were pretty solid. It takes the trump card of a combination of Kosh, Lorien and Sheridan to tip the balance and take out the Vorlon transport into the bargain to clear the way. And whilst it's sad to see Kosh go, it is still a testament to his faith in the younger races to see him sacrifice what's left of himself this way. This also reveals how Sheridan was saved and what it takes out of Lorien to do so. As old and powerful as he is, clearly he has limits, as he readily admits, so all he can do is top Sheridan up. He can't entirely fix him. And that's something both he and Delenn now have to come to terms with, assuming nothing nasty happens. He's only got 20 years now. There are clearly consequences to that. Perhaps it even focuses the mind more than would otherwise be the case. It also means he wants to commit to Delenn right now, because he wants to maximise their time together, which is a very lovely thing in amongst everything else that's happening. And we have Mr. Garibaldi fixating on Lorien, whilst denying everything that happened to him outright, despite clearly having snatches of memory. His motivations for that really aren't clear. Maybe he's hoping more comes back, or maybe he's afraid of what might happen if it does actually come back. We don't know any more than he does, but everyone can see something is off with him. And yet by the same token, the point he's making about Lorien's closeness to Sheridan, despite having known him more than 2 seconds, doesn't really seem suspect from a certain point of view. So it swings and roundabouts, really. And again, we see the almost messianic overtones to the way people treat Sheridan. As it happens, I have myself technically come back from the dead, so it's not actually all that uncommon these days. Happily though, it doesn't seem to be going to Sheridan's head. Very interesting that Londo reached out to Sheridan. I'm not even sure how he would have known he was back. I like that almost tacit acknowledgement that they were both trying to contain things in their own way. And Londo has, I think, now clocked exactly how far gone Cartagia is, but in realising that, it gives him a way to control him into a particular course, so that Londo can get him where he needs him to be to have a shot at him. What you don't see coming, of course, is what that's going to inadvertently do to Jakar. Not that he was well off in the first place, of course. No Via, but you can imagine that Londo has him doing stuff in the background for the Narn trip. Mr. Morden is looking slightly less crispy, but he doesn't seem to have grasped Cartagia's insanity in the same way Londo has. So his friends can keep their island, yes, but they're not going to get a full-scale Centauri mobilisation as he might have hoped. Not perhaps that it would do much good if the Vorlons are committed, because we do see a glimpse of the Planet Killer in action and the Guard fleet, and clearly no younger race is going to be able to put a scratch on it worth a damn. which does raise some interesting tactical questions as and when Sheridan's fleet is completed and ready to move. We do at least see an indication that the fleet is reforming now, which is probably only happening owing to Sheridan's return. So there are a few questions left unanswered here, despite it being a very important episode in terms of the younger races getting some momentum back. What's going to happen to Letha now she's effectively helped kill off one of her employers? Remains to be seen, clearly. What are the Shadows up to beyond simply hiding their ships again? Logically, their active ships aren't going to sit around and wait to be blown up by Vorlon planet killers, so they're going to have to do something. But it's far from clear right now what their game plan is, because they've never seen the Vorlons go this far before. This is breaking new ground, essentially. So we are a grand total of 4 episodes into this season, and we have quite a few balls in the air right now, but it feels like we've settled into a rhythm again now, as is sometimes the way. Everyone has to get their feet under the table again, I suppose. So I shall leave you to ponder this episode, and I will see you again for episode 5.